Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into a really profound framework for spiritual cultivation. This is derived directly from Eastern philosophical texts, specifically focusing on the topic of Ngun Kai Glap Kun Fa Hat Prakan, which translates in English to the 5 conditions for returning to heaven. Now, if you've ever felt like the path to true spiritual realization is just kind of vague or elusive, well, you're in the right place. This explainer is going to give you a highly structured, almost architectural blueprint for the soul. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's start by addressing this massive spiritual paradox that's presented right at the beginning of our source text. It asks a question that honestly hits pretty hard. Why do so many people start out on a spiritual journey only for so incredibly few to actually reach the ultimate destination? Well, the text suggests that starting is the easy part, right? You hear a great teaching, you feel super inspired, but the actual path back to our spiritual origin has been neglected for so long that it's literally overgrown with worldly distractions. You can't just casually stroll down it. You have to actively clear the brush yourself.
And the source text sets the stakes immediately by placing us in what it calls the White Sun Era. Now, according to the text, this isn't just any regular time in history. It's a crucial, urgent, cosmic window of spiritual harvesting and testing. Heaven is actively observing and selecting souls right now. The text describes this era as a time where immense cosmic disasters and massive spiritual salvation are essentially happening at the exact same time. Because the stakes are just so incredibly high, passive belief isn't going to cut it anymore. It demands immediate, highly structured spiritual action.
So, to actually pass this cosmic trial, we're going to break the journey down into a structured blueprint. We'll start with the spiritual bottleneck and then cover the 5 key conditions: moral virtue, strict discipline, right mindset, refined temperament, and we'll wrap up with fulfilling vows.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the spiritual bottleneck.
The urgency of this era is honestly undeniable. The text gets incredibly specific here, stating that out of the absolutely countless people who start the path, heaven is selecting exactly 3,600 saints and 48,000 sages. I mean, when you really think about the billions of people on Earth, that is a remarkably tiny number of highly refined souls. The source points out that many practitioners just fail because they lack the foundation, they give up the second they're tested, or they just don't have the right guidance. To squeeze through this massive bottleneck, we absolutely need a flawless foundation.
Which brings us nicely to Section 2, Pillar 1, Moral Virtue.
Without a bedrock foundation, everything else just collapses. Notice how the source breaks down virtue into actively purifying 3 distinct karmas. Moral virtue isn't just about being nice, it's an active daily detox of the mind, the body, and speech. For the mind, you've got to eliminate the toxic trio of greed, anger, and ignorance. For the body, it's about your physical actions in the world, like avoiding harm, killing, and stealing. And then there's speech. Honestly, this is often the hardest one. It means strictly avoiding lies, harsh words, and gossip. The text makes it super clear. Virtue is the visible outward expression of your inner spiritual truth. If your mind, body, and speech aren't clean, your whole spiritual foundation is fundamentally cracked.
Let's move on to Section 3, Pillar 2, Strict Discipline.
So, once you've got that virtue established, discipline steps in as a protective shield against our old bad habits. The source references the 4 do-nots, which are do not look at, listen to, speak of, or act upon anything contrary to propriety. Because humanity's spiritual roots are pretty shallow right now, we can't really rely purely on our spontaneous nature to do the right thing just yet. We have to use strict rules as our teacher first. Think of discipline like the sturdy guardrails on a super treacherous mountain road. It literally stops our external actions from wandering off a cliff into bad karma.
Next up is Section 4, Pillar 3, right mindset.
Okay, with our external actions fenced in and disciplined, we've got to turn entirely inward. The source gives us a really beautiful visual concept here. It contrasts our chaotic worldly mind with our true original mind. Right now, for most of us, our worldly mind is totally driven by ego, desires, wild emotions, and just endless chaos. We let external stuff completely control our internal state. But the original mind? It's compared to a flawless mirror. A mirror reflects whatever is put in front of it perfectly. But the very second that object leaves, the mirror is completely empty again. It doesn't hold on. It doesn't get attached to the reflection. To hit that right mindset, we have to empty ourselves of ego so our true, undisturbed original mind can actually shine through.
Moving right along to Section 5, Pillar 4, Refined Temperament.
Now, you can have all the virtue, discipline, and a calm mind when you're sitting alone in a quiet room, but what happens when the real world attacks you? Heaven basically uses the universe as a giant furnace to forge our souls through a literal cooking process. First comes frying, where you're just flipped back and forth, really testing if your ideals hold up. Then there's boiling, representing intense suffering that slowly boils away all your superficial layers. Next is baking, where you have to contain intense heat and pressure deep inside without exploding outward. And finally, grilling, that slow, agonizing burn that permanently chars away deep-seated desires. The text is brutal but clear. If you can't survive the kitchen, you can't refine your soul.
So why endure all this? Well, going through this rigorous forging process develops something called spiritual equanimity. And why does that matter so much? The source warns us that a single spark of anger, what it calls the fire of ignorance, can instantly burn down a vast forest of merits that you've literally spent lifetimes building up. Spiritual equanimity means that no matter how much you are provoked, misjudged, or severely tested by the people and situations around you, you absolutely refuse to let that fire of anger ignite. You remain totally, perfectly undisturbed.
And finally, Section 6, Pillar 5, Fulfilling Vows.
This is the point where all that beautiful internal philosophy is transformed into relentless outward action. Look, humanity hasn't just been wandering a little bit. The text states we have been caught in the cycle of reincarnation for 60,000 years. 60,000! Over those tens of thousands of years, we have racked up an absolute mountain of karmic debt. You cannot simply meditate your way out of that kind of debt. The source insists that only active, relentless work to fulfill our spiritual vows, actually helping others, spreading the truth, and executing holy duties can actually pay off a 60,000-year karmic tab.
To pull this off, we need a super clear, sequential roadmap. It always starts with faith, believing completely in the path. But honestly, faith alone is entirely insufficient. That faith has to trigger a vow, which is a massive, unbreakable commitment to a higher purpose. And then, that vow triggers the practice. That's the grueling, everyday physical work of serving others and enduring those cooking fires we just talked about. It's only by pushing through the hard practice that we finally reach realization, achieving the ultimate truth and returning to heaven.
I absolutely love this quote straight from the text because it perfectly summarizes why taking active, disciplined action across all 5 of these pillars is the ultimate requirement. We can respect the teachings all we want. We can perform all the right rituals. We can literally bow all day long. But bowing is passive. Becoming is an active, agonizing, and ultimately beautiful process of totally reconstructing your mind, your habits, and your actions from the ground up.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to really chew on as we wrap up this explainer. To survive the immense spiritual testing of the White Sun era, true salvation requires continuous refining action across your virtue, your discipline, your mindset, your temperament, and your vows. So ask yourself right now, are you just bowing to the idea of enlightenment, or are you actively forging yourself in the crucible today to return to where you truly came from? Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep learning.